Happy holidays to each and every one of you. I am honored and privileged to be before you once again. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Johnson. I am the Chief Strategy Officer right here at the CDC of Tampa. Each and every month, we feature our broadcast through podcasting. That's amazing. It is a wonderful opportunity for us to showcase some of the incredible things that we're doing here at the CDC of Tampa. Be for sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you can find social media. Find our podcast, The CDC Experience, and we'll be glad to have an interactive conversation with you. Even as you listen to the podcast that we offer, you can share with us if this benefited you or something you would like to hear about. The month of December is very special, not only because it is our time of celebrating family, but it's also a time to have a family chat and conversation. Every now and again, we need to have those fireside chats when we sit down as family and we talk about taboo things that we normally don't talk about. And today we have one of those taboo subjects that we want to talk about. We want to bring you in the conversation to have an organic chat to talk about something that we really don't talk about in the Black or the brown community. And that conversation is grief. Let me say that again. That conversation is grief. Today, I want to introduce someone who is a specialist in this area and in this field. We have Miss Nicole Whitley. She is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's the owner of Sound Mind Wellness Services right here in the Tampa Bay area. She's also trained in accelerated resolution therapy, which is known as ART. And if you have to describe her, she describes herself in 2 words: as a servant leader. In her personal life, she's a devoted mother. She's a caretaker for her elderly mother, and she's a fur baby mom. She has 2 dogs by the name of Jerry and Destiny. From our entire CDC Experience family that's watching, would you help me welcome Miss Nicole Whitley? Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
I'm going to ask you a question that you asked me. How are you taking care of Nicole? What are you doing to take care of you?
Well, I have a routine. So in the morning, after dropping my baby off to school, I normally go home. I do a little bit of...
You guys hear that New Yorker accent? I'm sorry, I just had to pull that out. She's from the Bronx. I had to bother with you. Down here in the South now.
So I do my routine. I work out in the morning. I do some meditations, make sure I do like some grounding techniques, of course, prayer. Just spending some time with myself, actually checking in with myself, seeing what's happening with me, how am I actually doing, and being real with myself about it.
So the next time we talk, I'm going to ask you, how are you taking care of you? Why do you think it is so taboo to talk about grief in the Black community? We all suffer with it. We all have lost someone. Yesterday, December the 12th, was a very emotional day for me. I remembered my mom's passing. It was the date of her passing. She died 12/12/12. Wow. And I was an adult in my 30s when my mom died 12 years ago. But yesterday was like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just so unbearable. I had a hard time getting out of the bed. And even me, a person of therapy, whether I am providing therapy or receiving therapy, it was still hard for me. I'm open to be vulnerable with my emotions, but that's not often in the Black community. Why is it so difficult to talk about grief and emotions?
Well, Dr. Johnson, like you said, it's uncomfortable, right? And we have become a culture that we love comfort. We have AC, we have the microwave, everything is accessible to us, right? So we don't enjoy discomfort, right? So grief is a tough subject. It's hard, it's emotional. And so this is why oftentimes people try to avoid it.
So what are some of the things that will categorize grief? Not only the passing, but the actual emotion. How would you describe that? What is grief? If a person is looking at this for the very first time and they've heard the word, but what's the emotion behind grief? What is it?
Well, there's several different what we call grief symptoms, right? So there's the feelings of sadness, there is yearning, right? So longing for the deceased or the thing, right? Because I also want to highlight that grief is not just limited to the death of someone, but when we experience a loss, period, right? So in 2020, that's when we went through COVID and we had a loss of normalcy, right? So things were shut down. We couldn't go to our favorite Starbucks, right? We couldn't do things as usual. People lost jobs, people lost homes, right? So oftentimes we overlook that as a form of grief.
So getting away from that normalcy, you go back into sadness. I think they classify 5 stages of grief. Would you talk about that, not necessarily in a particular order, but help us outline what grief is?
Yeah. So the 5 stages of grief actually is outdated information. Originally, when it was designed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, it was actually to share the experience of the person that was dying, right? So not the survivor, right? So it's a little bit outdated information when it comes to stages, right? Okay. Stages of grief. But what we do experience are different, we call like task of grief, right? Or so like the first thing will be coming to a level of acceptance about the loss. The next thing would be processing our feelings, and that's the hardest part for everybody because we come from a culture where we just want to suppress our feelings, right? The next one is adjusting to the world without the deceased or the thing, right? And then the last is kind of moving forward. And so I say this in an order, but it's not an actual order. It's not linear. These are just experiences that we have when we are experiencing grief.
Now let's look at that. Let's break that down. You said acceptance, process, adjusting, and moving forward. I think the ultimate goal is for us to move forward because I can share grief from a job that I've lost, from a family member that I've lost, a bad investment that I've lost, a relationship that I'm no longer in. So grief looks different for everybody, but we all experience that. Let's talk about the acceptance of it. You know, how do I get to that place that I accept something that I no longer have?
Right. So it's about an awareness, right? Oftentimes when we first experience a loss, we go into a numbness stage, right? And so this numbness is actually a self-preservation technique. It's a defense mechanism for a person to be able to continue to do daily things like go to the grocery store, get up, go to work, take care of children.
For granted doing something so simple that we do every day.
Right. Yeah. Right. So we're in this numbness stage. Some people might call it denial, or we might be on autopilot. But in this stage, we're not processing. Right? We're just going along with the motions. And so how do we move into acceptance? We begin to become aware that I'm actually numbing. I'm actually suppressing how I feel. I'm not okay, for real. And so when we gain that awareness, then we can move into an acceptance and begin to process that.
So why is it difficult for someone to say, I'm not okay? Yeah. What makes that so difficult for me just to come out? Is it the lack of vulnerability, or is it me talking to someone and they really not show genuine care? You know, everybody is busy, everybody has their own thing going on. So why would I tell someone that I'm not okay? Would they ignore me? So, you know, what's going on with people who have an issue? I won't even say an issue, a harder time identifying to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah. That's a really good question. It really depends on the individual. It could be mixed with trauma. It could be cultural. And some cultures, we just don't discuss when things are going on with us, right? It could be fear, right? To really express vulnerability, right? So it could be a plethora of different things depending on the individual as to why they don't express that they are not okay.
So how do I get to that place to accept that I'm not okay? I know it's different with every individual, but what's something you will recommend for a person to identify to say, okay, this isn't normal, right? I'm not okay. What would you recommend for them to do to get to that place to say I'm not okay?
Well, when you start, so depending on how your personality is, right? If you're somebody who's extrovert and is always going out, loves to be around people, and then all of a sudden you find yourself withdrawn, isolating, right? That would be an indication that you're not okay, right? If people around you are expressing like something is different, something is off, right? The physical body will tell you itself, right? It's not functioning. Foggy brain is often a grief symptom. People complain of, I just become so forgetful. I'm having a hard time. Yeah, I'm having a hard time making decisions. So when you begin to notice some things like that, that is some key elements to show you that you're not doing okay.
So let's walk in this progression. I'm aware that I'm not okay. I acknowledge that. How do I process it?
Right. So processing it is when these grief symptoms come up, right? So let's say I'm experiencing a feeling of sadness, right? Okay, I identify that I'm feeling sad. The next thing I want to do is validate that I am sad, right? Oftentimes what I find is that people dismiss that emotion, right? So I know that I feel sad, but right now I got to get to work. I got to deal with the kids. I don't have time to deal with it, right? And so we move forward. But the thing with emotion is that it actually wants attention, right?
That's good.
It wants attention.
Emotion wants attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I always describe emotions as like that child that's nagging you, right? So they be like, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson, right? And it's not until you like, what? Right? What is it? What can I do for you? And
that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Right. So that's what emotion wants. It wants your attention. That's what it's there for. It's there to communicate with you, right? So it's saying, hey, Nicole, something is going on, right? We need your help, right? And so when you pay attention to it, right, then it can kind of subside because that's what it wants. But when you don't pay attention to it, then it flares up even more.
It's going to get your attention one way or the other, right? Either you voluntarily pay attention to me, or I'm going to show up in the midst of when you least likely expect it, and you're around a bunch of people, but you feel isolated and you start breaking down and have no reason why. Because your emotions were talking to you for a long time and you ignore them. So now I'm aware, I'm processing this. How do I adjust? What's the new normal for me to adjust to this life-changing, life-altering situation?
Right. So in this like area of adjusting to the world without the deceased or without the thing that you had that you lost, it has three different components in it, right? So the first is internal, because internally we're adjusting, right? So maybe if it was a spouse that passed away, now I'm adjusting to being a widow, right? If it was maybe a business, right? And that was what I felt my purpose was. Now, internally, I'm like, well, what is my purpose now, right? So these are internal adjustments. And then we have external adjustments, which comprise of maybe learning new skills, right? Learning a new role, right? Because if using an example of having a spouse or a loved one, right? If this was the sole bread provider for the home, now I have to learn new skills in order to provide the bread for the home now, right? And so this is what the external adjustments comprise of. And then we have spiritual adjustments, right? So when we experience a loss, it's either going to impact us in a way where we draw closer to whatever our spiritual belief or withdraw from it, right? So all of these things are happening during this process.
So we're identifying the internal, the external, and the spiritual, the mind, body, and soul, right? So now we've accepted, we're aware, we're processing, we're adjusting. Now we need to move forward.
Right.
Help us move forward.
Right. So in this moving forward, it's creating whatever your new norm is going to be, right? So whatever that looked like, the skills that you had to learn, the internal adjustments that you had to make, the spiritual adjustments, the feelings that come up. So we're applying the skills that we've learned, right? How to cope in a healthy way, actually embracing my feelings, right? So we're all the things that we've learned through the other steps. This is now what we're doing in this recovery phase, right? Creating what our new norm looks like, right? And also in this phase, we want to commemorate that thing that is lost, right? So if it's a person or a pet or, a relationship, right? There are moments and times where we need to acknowledge that it happened, right? And commemorate the loved one. Sometimes they call this like the meaning making stage, right? So making sense out of it. What am I going to do now? Sometimes in this phase is where we see things are like birthed out, right? We see foundations that are made to commemorate maybe a child that passed away. We see movements that happen around the world, right? If it's a significant loss in that manner. And so great things actually come from this stage. Growth happens in this stage. Yeah, so that's the moving forward part. Oftentimes we focus on loss, we focus on the things that we lost. But actually in the grieving process, it's a wonderful way to grow. This is where you're being stretched, right? This is where you're finding out how resilient you are. This is where you're learning the new skills that you never thought you would be able to learn. So you're applying all of this and moving forward in the world.
The grieving process is a wonderful time to grow. Speak directly to our viewers today who says, it's the holidays, I feel bummy. I've lost mom, I've lost dad, I've lost a child, I've lost a sibling, and Christmas and New Year's just don't seem the same. If they were in this room with you right now, what would you tell them?
It's all about making a plan, right? We need to have a plan in place. The holidays are coming, they're quickly approaching, so it's not something that we can ignore. Oftentimes I hear people be like, I just want to lay in bed and just let the day pass by. But let's make a plan. And so what's included in that plan could be, what exactly do I want to do that day, right? If you don't want to do anything else but maybe feed the dogs, right? That's okay. But make a plan of that, right? Make a list of what are some of your favorite mood boosters, right? So what are some things that you enjoy that kind of shifts your mood, right? I enjoy things like music, reading, right? Who are some people that you can actually call and talk to, right? So having these things written out, that's what I often do with my clients, is make what I call a grief care plan, right? What are some of my favorite distractions? So the better that you can plan for the day instead of just wanting the day to disappear when it's not, it will help to validate how you're feeling in this experience and also provide you with the tools that you need to get through it.
Friends, there is growth in grief. I was vulnerable to share that this has been a difficult season for me, and even before we decided what we wanted to talk about this month, I knew that persons may be struggling. Everyone may not be open and honest to say, I need help. This is a rough time for me. Or centering yourself around family who can support you when there is sadness, when there are thoughts of depression, that you're not alone and you're not isolating yourself. I often say, sometimes we may isolate ourselves. That means that we just remove ourselves from certain things, but never insulate. Because when you insulate, you cut off your supply of oxygen back to your life for you to thrive and be unique and be amazing. Nicole, share with us how we can reach you. If persons want to talk to you about grief, how can they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Nicole Whitley, licensed clinical social worker and grief specialist. You can reach me through my website, smwellnessllc.com. You can give me a call, 727-877-0416.
Friends, we thank you for listening to the CDC Experience. It has been our absolute pleasure to talk to you about a taboo topic, but it will help all of us. Whether you need it today or next week, this is a subject that will affect you, and this broadcast will help you. Would you share this with someone else who suffered a recent loss, or you know that they are privately grieving? Hopefully the words in which we share today will be a blessing to them. Once again, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Chief Strategy Officer of the CDC of Tampa. You've been watching the CDC Experience. Follow us on any of our outlets and we'll be glad to connect with you. We're doing some amazing things in 2025. We're looking to build over 50 homes and impact more than 700 people through our workforce development programs and bless and support over 100 businesses. So there are a lot of things that are taking place. Look at us online at www.cdcoftampa.org. Until next time, continue to win.